Welcome to Collective Day. I am Pastor Joshua Alexander, the Executive Director of All Nations Collective. It is an absolute honor to be here and to be able to teach these wonderful pastors, senior pastors at that, about some key principles that I think is going to be instrumental to what you're building and what you're doing in your particular worlds. So again, I am Joshua Alexander, Executive Director of All Nations Collective, and I am excited to be before you guys today. Today, I'm going to talk to you about the 7 keys to organizational safeguarding. 7 keys to organizational safeguarding. One of the things that's very, very important for us to understand, even when we're dealing with our own personal ministries, our businesses, we have to understand that we have to expect the unexpected. So you never know what's going to happen in your organizational world. So I think one of the key things that you need to recognize and be able to plan for is for the unexpected to happen. So what's going to happen through what I'm going to share with you, these key principles are going to be vital to making sure that you safeguard in every area of your organization while you're building. So if you're sitting next to someone, just look at them. Look at your neighbor, look at your brother and sister. If you're in your living room, wherever you are, I want you to look at, or just say it out loud to yourself. Say, anything can happen. Anything can happen. Continued success is not, I want you guys to hear everything that I'm saying very, very clear. Continued success is not guaranteed to any organization or church, no matter its current state. So no matter what state you're currently in, I don't care if you are a church where you have 2,000 members or a church that have over 5,000 members, current success is not guaranteed. So one of the things that you have to understand before I get into these 7 keys is that the reason why safeguarding is so important is because you do not know when things are going to change in your organization. The truth is you're serving people. And the truth about people is people change. People change day in and day out. People change. Life circumstances come that causes people to make different decisions. So you never know what's going to happen in your organization. So these are reasons why you must safeguard. What is safeguarding? Safeguarding is a measure taken to protect someone or something, as in your organization, as in your church, or to prevent something undesirable. So let me read that again. Safeguarding is a measure taken to protect someone or something, or to prevent something undesirable. So when we're talking through these keys are important to implement because you want to prevent your organization, your church from folding completely. That's very, very important. So I'm going to get into these keys, and I want you all to follow me very, very closely. Key number 1, put your why. Everybody say why. Put your why in the driver's seat. That's key number 1. Your why must be in the driver's seat. The why is what defines your organization. So why do we exist? Why do we call ourselves this name? Why are we going this route? Why? Why is what defines your organization. Your entire organization, from who, what, when, and where, is driven by your why. Your entire organization should be driven by your why, from your who, your what, your when, and your where. Now let's start. Your why clarifies who, everybody say who should be leading in your organization. Your why determines what you should be focused on in every season of your organization. Your why provides you with strategy on the critical moves necessary in your organization. So that's your when. Your why directs the organization on where to go. So these are the important keys of your why. It clarifies, it determines, it provides, and it directs. Make sure you know what your why is. I know there's a lot of organizations exist, or churches. Let me talk to the pastors. A lot of churches exist and they have not clarified what the why is. Sometimes you can talk. I've talked to pastors and I ask them, that's the first thing that I ask when I'm talking to pastors, what is your why? And a lot of them respond, well, I have to think about that. So your why have to be clearly defined, and you need to know what that is. Make sure those you serve know what the why is. Make sure those that lead know what the why is. Every level of future planning should be rooted and directed from the why. It is very, very important. You're going to cause mass confusion in your organization if your organization, on every level, those you serve and those who lead, if they do not know what the why is. As soon as chaos or something comes in the midst, decisions must be made around and centered around that why. So key number 1, put your why in the driver's seat. Key number 2, make sure your values are your values. What are values? Values are a person's or an organization's principles or standards of behavior. Make sure that your values are your values. I know a lot of times in ministry, we're keen on creating value statements. But a lot of times, no one in your organization even know what those value statements are. If you have values, make sure that they are your values. How? By it being exemplified in every aspect of your organization. Values are key things, or values are things that have to be continuously rehearsed. Values are as important as vision. You know, in your organization or church, you know vision, but a lot of times the people do not know values. So you got to make sure that those values are your values. How are you expected to behave here in this organization? Those are one of the things that your values determine. How do we behave here? What are our standards? What will we tolerate and what will we not tolerate? Your values are as flavor is to food. What makes what you offer so great are the values that's associated with what produces your products. We talk about Chick-fil-A, for example, and it's not that Chick-fil-A put a lot of things, or like their sandwiches are typically a bread, chicken, and a bread. But the thing about Chick-fil-A, I believe, that makes that experience so great are the values surrounded around that organization. As soon as you pull up in that driveway, how can I serve you? How are you? My name is such and such. So using that as an example, the values will make the experience what it is and make the experience different. So you have to make sure that your values are your values. Enforce your values throughout your entire, that's a key word, entire organization, and in everything that is done to produce what you offer. As it relates to your values, you want to make sure that your values are not just operated or exemplified in one department. You want to make sure that your values are shown in every department and in every area of your organization. Don't run the risk of your values becoming a waste to your organization. Now, how do you run that risk? By making sure that your values are on your website, but your leaders don't know what they are. That's how you waste values. Making sure that you quote values on Vision Day, but in department meetings, if we were to ask, what are the values of this organization, it can't be quoted. That's a waste. So make sure that you do not run the risk of wasting your values, wasting values in your organization. One of the steps to make sure you have values is that making sure that they are visible. Now, as leaders, the first place that our values sit would be on our websites. Well, that cannot be the only place that your values sit. When people come in your church or when people come into your business, Do they see your values on your walls? Do they see your values in your products? Do they see your values written out? If you're selling things, do they see your values on the back of the boxes? Do they see values on the end of an email? You've got to make sure that your values are visible in as many areas as possible within your organization. So make sure that they are visible. Here's another key thing. Make sure your values are something you, as the leader, and your people can live up to. Do not set values that you guys can't live up to. Don't set extreme values that you know that as an organization we're not going to follow. So make sure that you can live up to that. And the last thing on that key is practice what you preach. So if you preach that as a value, make sure you're practicing that as a value. If we say that this is a value in our organization, then in front of the people or with the people, then it needs to be the same values in your boardroom. You've got to make sure that you practice what you preach. All right, the next key is have regular culture cleansing. Culture cleansing. Repeat after me. Culture cleansing. Never be afraid of evaluating your culture. I think culture sometimes is an intimidating factor to a leader. You cannot be afraid to evaluate your culture. You need to know what exists within your culture. Everyone is impacted by the condition of your culture. You've got to understand that culture should not only be regulated by how you feel as a leader. You've got to understand that not only you as a leader is impacted, but also let me rephrase, not only you as a senior leader is impacted, but your executive leaders are impacted and the people you serve are impacted. You have to make sure that you understand the effects of culture. Dr. Sam Chan teaches this, that culture is created at the top, so that's at a senior executive level, sustained from the bottom, so that's your customers, or in church context, your partners or your members, and destroyed from the middle. That's your employees or your leadership team. So it's created at the top by executive leadership, sustained from the bottom by partners and members, and destroyed from the middle by employees or leadership teams. So if you do not address culture at the top, then by the time that begins to trickle down, it is going to impact your organization in a terrible, terrible, terrible way. You need to regularly identify where toxicity is living in your culture. If not, it can grow into something you cannot handle. Cancer is real, but not only cancer in the body, but cancer in the organization. And cancer in an organization, a lot of times, these are areas in our organization that we do not address. So you know that there is chaos, or you know that there is trouble in a particular area of your organization that does not meet or follow up to the set values that you set for your organization. If you do not address that, and if you are a passive leader, then that thing is going to turn and become cancerous and ultimately destroy your organization. Sometimes we, as pastors especially, we look at numerics to determine the health of what we're doing. But how many of you know that you can be large in number, but be cancerous at the core, and then out of nowhere, the whole thing is destroyed, and or your legacy cannot live on. So this is why it's very, very important for you to identify where that toxicity is. Identifying culture toxicity is not enough. Like I said, it must be addressed and it must be dealt with. You have to come up with strategy, and you have to come up with ways to continue to address the areas of toxicity. If you fear confrontation, as I said, you cannot be passive. If you fear confrontation as a leader, toxic culture will overtake you and your organization. Culture is way more powerful than your vision. So you can have a vision for something, you can dream about something. However, if whatever's happening on that culture level, it's way more powerful. If culture is being destroyed, hear me, if culture is being destroyed in the middle, then whatever's happening in that middle, that bottom, which are your partners and your members, they're going to uphold whatever's happening in that middle. And if that is not dealt with, then you're going to continue to see the same things happen, ultimately destroying what you've built, ultimately destroying the vision that you set forth. I mean, you've had 1,000 vision meetings, but you continue to have these meetings and no progress because there's something happening in the culture. The next key is, which is one of my favorites, is establish a clear chain of command. A clear chain of command. Every leader or staff needs a supervisor, and they need to know who that supervisor is. You cannot have a staff member in a position and they do not know who their supervisor is. Just them knowing that they're supervised, you need to clarify, make sure that your staff and your leaders. Now listen, this is the other thing. If you have volunteer leaders, this is not just for paid staff, but if you have volunteers that's volunteering in your organization or volunteering in a particular position, they need to know who their supervisor is. Every supervisor needs to be empowered with the necessary authority to supervise. So there is no point of having a supervisor. Hear me, Pastor. There is no point of having a supervisor if that supervisor does not have the authority to supervise. You have to empower that leader, that supervisor, with that level of authority to be able to supervise the people that they are over. Make sure everyone on your team have a job description and make sure that the responsibilities are clear. So now those are two different things. Having a job description is one thing, and ensuring that their responsibilities are clear is another thing. So you need to make sure that on both ends that they are set up. So a job description will give them a summary of what they are responsible for, but those responsibilities, you have to build that out and you have to break that out to make sure that they understand it and that they are walking into it. A lot of your disappointments with your leaders and your staff is because you have not clarified what they're responsible for. So make sure that's clear on every level. And here's the thing. Create an organizational flow chart from the highest role to the lowest tier of leadership and make sure it is accessible to anyone in your organization. I'm going to say on both ends, it needs to be accessible to anyone, but make sure that your leadership is learned by what that organizational flow is. Make sure that they understand how it works and how it flows. The next key is write out and clarify your organization's operational policies and procedures. Now, those two words are sometimes intimidating because a lot of leaders don't know where to start with it, and it's easier for a leader to just keep it in their head. So y'all supposed to know that when you come in through the door, you need to say hello. Well, you assuming that they know to say hello is not enough if they were not educated on that, or if that was not written or published somewhere where they could follow that. So that leads me to my point within that key is you need a how-to guide. Well, that's a key thing, a how-to guide. A lot of times leaders get questions, how do you do this and how do you do that? I think it's beneficial that all of your leaders have a how-to guide. And I don't think that there's anything too small for you to teach or train your people on how to do it. So I think you need a how-to guide on how to submit an event form, or a how-to guide on how to submit a graphics request, a how-to guide on how to submit a counseling session request. You need how-to guides. If it is not written, this is my rule, if it is not written, it does not exist. If it is not written, it does not exist. Make sure that anything that you set as a policy or procedure, that it is also written. Now, I'm going to teach you something. Make sure that the green, yellow, and red light policies and procedures exist. I'm going to tell you what those are. Green light policies and procedures, these are policies and procedures that start. I want you to say to the screen, start in a specific department. When you're writing out policies and procedures, make sure that you have that starting point. Yellow light policies and procedures. These are policies and procedures that's pending review and or approval in one department to give clearance for it to be activated in another department. So green light is, this is the trigger for that policy or procedure to be active. Yellow light, this is where that policy and procedure pause. And we're waiting for it right here until we have the clearance for it to continue. And then red light, these are the policies and procedures that have a landing spot or stops in a specific department. So every policy and procedure should start somewhere. Every policy and procedure should end somewhere. In between, with some policies and procedures, there are clearance paths. So you may have those areas where you have to have caution or wait or pause for a moment to get clearance for it to get to its end point. So those are policies and procedures. I have 2 more keys and then I'm out of your way. Enforce 360 accountability. I just want you to say out loud wherever you are, accountability. All right, when I think of accountability, there are 3 key things that I think of accountability. It's what I would say. So when you think of accountability, I want you to think of these 3 things: answerability, liability, and responsibility. Answerability, liability, and responsibility. Answerability is explaining your actions. Liability is you are on the hook for this. This is on you. And responsibility is it is your duty to perform this task. So answerability, liability, and responsibility equals accountability. All right? I like that. Answerability, liability, and responsibility equals accountability. No person in your organization or your church should be exempt from accountability. Build out a clear accountability system for everything established in your organization, from the lowest tier to the highest tier. Establish clear approval, review, and denial processes. That's where accountability exists. No one should do something without it being approved. And whatever you present can be denied. And whatever's on the table must be reviewed. It's what we call checks and balances. Accountability is necessary from the most senior position, again, to the lowest tiered position. Make sure the accountability circle is all the way around in your organization. That's why I said 360 accountability. Sometimes we have 180 accountability or whatever. So make sure that circle of accountability goes all the way around. This is how you safeguard your organization. The last key, create and establish a succession plan. Is your organization, now this is my question, is your organization temporary? Is your organization seasonal? Or is your organization what I would call generational? And that's from generation to generation. And the reason why I'm asking is sometimes we make those determinations about our organization, and then we decide whether or not succession is relevant. Well, here's what I want to tell you. You need a succession plan for a temporary organization, for a seasonal organization, and a generational organization. Obviously, all of those succession plans will look different. But if you decided to start something, until you make a decision or until it is scheduled for that thing to end, you have to plan for the unexpected. This is why succession is important. Whoever that leader is, what happens after you? Senior pastor, what happens after you're done? What happens after you with this organization, with this church? Or is this something that you want to die when you die? I mean, you put in all of this work and you don't want your organization to crumble or die when you die, or not just die, but when you just give up or when you're done with the assignment. Do not name just one successor. That's my encouragement to you. In any organization, I encourage you to not name just one successor. I'm not. I don't have a recommendation on how many. I remember when just in my journey, I planned out a succession plan, and in my plan, I named 4 possible successors. Succession is important, so it cannot be on the back of just one person. And you got to be careful, because you can make a promise to a person or position a person to where they feel like that they are next, and then you force them into performance, and then when it's time for them to take the seat, then they are not equipped or able to handle it. Which leads me to my next point, that in any succession plan, you need governance around it. So you need to make sure that there's leadership around that, and make sure that there's a plan in place to where there's not one sole person that makes a decision on that successor or that named successor taking the seat. Because here's my belief, that although you named a successor does not mean that they are qualified and equipped at the time of succession for them to take that seat. So that's important. And then the last thing, and then I'll leave you with this, on the succession end, don't just plan for your demise, plan for your retirement. Don't plan just for when you die or when you're no longer in the earth. Plan for your retirement. You may get to a point in your life where you're done with this particular assignment, but that doesn't mean that this organization is done with serving these people. And so plan for your retirement and not just your demise. All right, here's my note that I'm going to leave with you all, and then I'm going to give you the 7 keys for your notes, just in case you didn't get them. But here's my note before I get to this final recap. Don't forfeit stability over excitement. I want you to hear me. This is wisdom talking. Do not forfeit stability over excitement. Excitement is temporary. Do you hear me? Excitement is always on the back of something that just happened, and excitement don't that same excitement don't last long. Excitement is similar to a high. Then you're going to be trying to figure out a new way to bring that high back up or to bring that excitement back up. So do not forfeit stability over excitement. It may be painful for your leaders to have to write out policies and to have to rehearse the values, to have to make sure that there's review and approval processes. But here's the thing, that ensures stability in your organization. Here are the 7 keys. Put your why in the driver's seat. Make sure your values are your values. Have regular culture cleansing. Establish a clear chain of command. Write out and clarify your organization's operational policies and procedures. Enforce 360 accountability, and create and establish your succession plan. Well, that's what I have for you today. Again, I am Pastor Joshua Alexander, Executive Director of All Nations Collective. You have a fantastic day. God bless.